We've built a smartphone framework that can solve a lot of pain points that we were experiencing with smartphones. It can remotely collect data. We can need it about 10 minutes. We can get access to phones anywhere in the world. Our average collection time is about 90 minutes. And we're the only system that can actually target the data at collection. So if you're looking for that one text, you're looking for the WhatsApp conversations for a 6-month time scope, our framework is intelligent enough to talk to your custodian's phone and just return that data back.
Today on LawNext, how one legal tech startup is simplifying the collection of data from mobile devices for e-discovery, legal holds, compliance, and investigations. My guest is Matt Rasmussen, the co-founder and CEO of ModeOne, a company whose SaaS technology offers the industry's only selective, fully remote data collection from smartphones and other mobile devices. Matt had worked for some 20 years in litigation technology and support at major law firms, Fortune 500 companies, and litigation services providers when he wondered why mobile collections had to be so time-consuming, inefficient, and invasively overbroad. Turns out there was a better way, and 2 years ago, Rasmussen and his co-founders brought ModeOne to the legal market. I'm Bob Ambrogi, and you're listening to LawNext, the podcast that features the innovators and entrepreneurs who are driving what's next in law. We'll get to that in just a moment, but first, please take this opportunity to learn about the sponsors whose generosity helps keep this podcast going. Experience the next generation of legal technology with Paradigm. Paradigm's products, Practice Panther, Maris Case, Lolly Law, and Bill for Time offer lawyers the ultimate toolkit for success across various practice areas and business needs. Whether you require comprehensive practice management platforms, native online payment solutions, or flexible time tracking, Paradigm is the one-stop shop for law firms of all sizes and practices. Discover the Paradigm difference by visiting them at joinparadigm.com. Now on to today's conversation. Matt, welcome to LawNext.
Hey, thanks, Bob. Appreciate you having me, man.
Yeah, looking forward to talking to you. We met at Ilticon a little while ago and had a nice, quick little chat there. So I'm looking forward to diving in a little bit deeper than we were able to do then and learning a little bit more about what you're doing. But before we get into any of what you are doing today, I wonder if we could just kind of start with your background and who are you? How did you get to where you are right now?
Sure. So I'm Matt Rasmussen. I'm the founder and CEO of ModeOne Technologies. I'm from Omaha, Nebraska. I was working as a waiter at P.F. Chang's before getting swept up into the paper game and started through like copying and scanning for discovery. And so that's kind of where my genesis into the industry came in. I got really lucky. I rode the wave how technology was kind of coming through discovery there. So I went from scanning to e-discovery and the Discovery Cracker days and stuff like that. And through my experience there, I got picked up by Bingham & McCutcheon out in San Francisco. And that's kind of where my defense firm experience had started. So I've been in e-discovery for 24 years now, mainly on the defense law firm side. Before starting ModeOne, I ran the litigation technology team at O'Melveny & Myers for 8.5 years and made the jump into doing my own thing and creating some new software here.
I know Bingham & McCutcheon well from there. They really were a Boston firm before they were anything else. They
it depends on who you ask for.
I know it definitely depends. I know that, but they started in Boston, and I knew a lot of people who worked for them in the Boston office.
Oh, so that's awesome. Yeah, I think it was Bingham Dana and McCutcheon Doyle were the two teams. And it was I was there just post that merger there, so got to experience both those teams pretty well.
Yeah. So what is ModeOne? Let's start with sort of the nutshell, and we're going to get a lot more into it. But
sure.
just for somebody who's never heard of you before, what is ModeOne?
Yeah, absolutely. So ModeOne's a smartphone collection framework. So while I was at O'Melveny, through various different types of cases, different types of clients, consistently the one thing that was the biggest pain point, not only for me, but for the client, for the attorney teams, was smartphones. And that was because we were having to use law enforcement tactics and exploiting the phone to like seize everything off of a custodian's phone, when we may have just needed something a little bit more granular. We needed the text, a couple photos, things like that. So what we've done is we've built a smartphone framework that can solve a lot of the pain points that we were experiencing with smartphones. It can remotely collect data. We can need it about 10 minutes. We can get access to phones anywhere in the world. Our average collection time is about 90 minutes. We're the only system that can actually target the data at collection. So if you're looking for that one text, you're looking for the WhatsApp conversations for a 6-month time scope, our framework is intelligent enough to talk to your custodian's phone and just return that data back. I started it because of how many custodians I had throwing up the defenses at me, like, why are you collecting my whole phone? You just needed a couple pieces of data. And that's what kind of prompted me and my partners to jump out of the nest and start ModeOne here.
So can you kind of break down a little bit more what the problem was? I mean, what exactly how has traditionally this data been collected off of smartphones before you came along?
Sure. Yeah. So the traditional method is to do a full system extraction. So there's lots of different tools out there. Some of them are heavily used by law enforcement. Some of them are used for iTunes backup reading, stuff like that. Um, the problem is that it takes a lot of parties to get a phone even scheduled, right? So just using my O'Melveny experience, right? I'd have to have the attorney team, the custodian, myself, usually the custodian's secretary or assistant. That's at least 4 parties that we're managing for a 4 to 8 hour time period because that's how long it would take to collect that data. So on top of scheduling, then we get to where the phone's at. We have to take everything from them. So all their personal photos, all their conversations with their significant others, all this non-relevant data that's over retaining information. That's how that would be happening. So a custodian's out of, like, they can't use their phone for several hours. And then, there's just a bunch of costs that are associated with that, right? Forensic examiners charge to travel on site. They charge for shipping. They have to ship kits around to gain access to these phones, or the phones have to come to them. And it's just a big, I mean, it's a quagmire of issues here. But that's how it's handled, right? We schedule the collection. We either get the phone back to us or we go to where the phone's at. And that could be, call that a week, right? And we're just done with the collection piece now. So moving past that, right? If we need to be assessing the metadata, if we need to be reviewing the content, right? We're processing all that data. This data that's on your phone is not a single document, right? We're no longer dealing with 4 corners of a document anymore. These are massive databases that have lots of connectors to the phone. So you're paying to process all the data you received, and you're paying to convert all the data you received. And so it just, downstream, especially like in a litigation or lawsuit or anything like that, the cost is just kind of, insane. So
And the logistics. I mean, if I'm an employee of a mega corporation and they're involved in litigation and they need data off of my phone, I've got my phone sitting right here. If I'm a remote employee, what do I have to send them my phone? Do they come get my phone? I mean, what, again, not using ModeOne, but
sure.
traditionally, how
Yeah,
would that
yeah.
have happened?
You got 3 options, right? Either we would ship a person to where you're at, Bob. So somebody would show up to your house to grab your data. We would either drop a laptop kit into FedEx or something and ship that to you and then walk you through the steps to do it yourself. Or we'd have your phone come to the lab, right? So you would ship your phone back. Those are the 3 options, right? There was no ability to, I mean, your phone can communicate and send so much data, but there was no way to remotely access it. So it required this very kind of physical interaction with the device.
Yeah. So, how did you decide you were going to be the one to tackle this? I mean, how did you, this is probably a problem that's common throughout the industry. How did you one day wake up and said, "Okay, I'm starting a company to take care of
Yeah.
this problem"?
Oh, that's great question. The honest answer is self-preservation. I had a client where we collected 800,000 text message bubbles from them, and that all got dumped into Excel, and I had to work with the attorney team to extract data out of that. And it took forever. I mean, I bet it took 2 weeks just to get the Excel sheet. And then we're under a deadline. And now we've got a lot of pressure to find what we're looking for and create it and represent it in a defensible manner, even though we're somewhat picking and choosing from that Excel sheet what we wanted. And so I just kind of analyzed at O'Melveny, who were my support vendors? How were they supporting phones? Was anyone trying to take this to the next level to target that data or protect the privacy? And no one was. And I just had given my custodians the same speech too often. Hey, Bob, I'm going to collect your whole phone. I'm not going to look at it, right? You can trust me. I'm your law firm. But I'm here to represent you in the case that you're involved in. And I just had that conversation too many times. And I had one specific entertainment executive who just, became unhinged when I told them I was collecting everything. And that's kind of the straw that broke my back was nobody else in the industry was tackling this. So we decided to do it.
So how did you go about tackling it? What are you doing that wasn't being done before?
Yeah, so the first step for us was we did a bunch of R&D to make sure it was possible, right? Like maybe no one has tackled it because it's impossible, right? So that was step one.
Yeah.
And then that's where we cracked the code on it's possible. Let's build to do that, right? And so the things that we analyzed to see to make sure that we could do this is one, can we remotely access these through the internet? The answer is yes, right? And we figured out how to do that in an encrypted way. Can we talk to the phone and get the data that we need off? Or is it require us to collect the whole phone, right? Figured out how to do that. And now and that's where we started. And like over the last 2.5 years, we continued to do that research on how can we date filter? How can we participant filter? And we just kind of took like our e-discovery mindset of how we interact with our email, with custodians' OneDrive and their laptop. And we applied those methodologies to the phone.
So you launched this to the market in 2022, right? I think you were working on it
Correct.
for a few years before that,
Yep.
probably,
That's right.
and brought it to market in 2022. And I know I also met Ryan Fry, who's your CIO, when we met at ILTA. Also, just trying to understand is sort of how did you mentioned you were at PF Chang's before you got into working in the legal field. I mean, how did you get the technical expertise and background? Did you have that? Did Ryan bring that? Did you bring others in who have that to kind of develop this?
Yeah, so if I've ever done one thing right, I've surrounded myself with the right partners. That's for sure. And that would be the one thing I preach always. I do a pretty good job from like I think a traditional role would be kind of like a sales engineer, right? Like I
Yeah.
understand the end user's use case.
Yep.
I'm savvy enough to understand the technical aspects. And I think just because I grew up in the industry through my career, I kind of just learned through immersion. But when we get into like the forensics of it, the defensibility of it, hashing, all the deep stuff, that's Jason Proviance, that's Ryan Fry, that's bringing again those right experts into the team to make sure that we're bulletproof, that we are defensible, that we are validating the data and stuff like that. So it's been great because we really do complement ourselves very well. Where I may be a little bit more technically deficient, I've got Ryan and Jason flexing there.
So again, going back to that scenario of here I am working for mega corporation and you need to collect data off my phone. How is it different with ModeOne?
So there's 12 steps that kind of happen in a traditional workflow, right? We get a request for the phone, we have to procure bids to find it, we have to get approval from the client to do it, then we're scheduling the collection, then we're shipping a kit, then we actually collect the device. That's step 6. So like halfway through, we're now collecting the phone, then we're shipping the data back, transferring it to a server, processing it, converting it so the human eyes can read it. Then we're importing that into a review tool.
Sounds very time consuming and
It is.
expensive.
It's incredibly time consuming. It is. I was paying $4,000 a phone back at the firm. It can take 2+ weeks. So how it's different for us is the first 4 steps we take out just because our clients have a license of ModeOne. We take care of the bid procurement, the infosec. So we don't have any of those delays. So for us, it comes down to a client knows they have a phone. So I'm going to collect Bob's phone. They email Bob, hey, Bob, I need to collect your phone. When are you ready? And they say, I can be ready in 15 minutes. Step 2 is the administrator can kick off that collection to Bob's phone through some enrollment stuff with the custodian. Everything is consent based. We're not doing any stealth collections or anything like that. It takes about 10 minutes to do that. So I'd connect with you, Bob. Hey, I need some information from you. We get the process started. And from there, the human element is done. So it sounds crazy, but we've taken a 2-week process down to about 15 minutes. From here, the custodian goes about their day. They can still use their phone. They carry on with their business activities. Whoever the examiner is that kicked off the collection, they can go to the next project. They can go to lunch. They can do whatever. We've taken our collective experience just being procurers and providers of this service. We've just made the whole process efficient so that we take out as much of the human element as we can and really leverage the technology to do as much as we can. So after we've started the collection, the average collection time is about 90 minutes. Again, the computers do everything. The cloud's sending instructions down, the data is being sent back up, everything's being handled automatically. And then when we're done, the custodian gets a notification that their collection is complete. They unplug their phone, go about their day, right? And so it sounds crazy, but we've taken that 12-step process and made it into 3, small steps. And that's what's really giving us a lot of efficiency gain there.
And that $4,000 a phone you were paying before, what are you paying now?
So it's fractional cost there. So our MSRP is $1,500, but that's all encompassing, right? That's the collection, that's processing that data, that's converting that data. I mean, honestly, when I was at O'Melveny, if I needed data converted to RSMF or PDF, my vendors were charging me $750 a phone just for the conversion, right? So a lot of people will say, "Oh, well, I get my phones collected for 650 bucks." That's absolutely true, but that's all that's happening, right? That's the only thing that's happened. There's no one's processing it, no one's analyzed it, none of the downstream stuff is handled. So
Right.
that's where we kind of arrived to our MSRP of 1500. Obviously, we have licensing options. So for users that have more devices that they do a year, or they're a service provider and they're outsourcing to a lot, or they're providing services to a lot of different law firms, we can be in the sub hundreds of dollars per unit there. And so it's great because like for us, we're making money, right? That's what we're here for. Our clients are able to either cut their costs or make money, and the ultimate client is also significantly driving down their costs. So it really is kind of a triple win the way we've set that up.
As I understand it, one of your distinguishing factors is what you just described, is sort of the ease with which you can do it remotely or not. Or not. Another distinguishing factor is that you're able to be much more targeted in the data that you're collecting off the device, right?
Correct.
So what does that mean?
And that's huge for two different reasons. So what it means, I guess, to start there is by app, by date, and by participant, we can laser into the data we're grabbing. So if I just needed the texts between Matt and Bob off of Bob's phone, we can be that intelligent to do that. And what that means for the custodian is that we're really defending their data privacy, right? These phones have every app, every email account routes through them. That's certainly not up for grabs on a litigation about copyright infringement or something like that, right? So it's a huge gain for us there, specifically when we're doing international collections like GDPR issues and stuff like that. Custodian data privacy is like the key thing for folks. So that's number one. Number two is on the corporate side, we're also preventing the over retention of data, right? So they have an obligation to preserve what's relevant, make sure that they're assessing the right data. But if the request was for communications with X, Y, and Z, that's not their podcasts that we need to collect. That's not their health information that we need to grab from their phone. And it's not their photos. But if you use a traditional method where you're seizing everything from the phone and then storing that data, these phones are a terabyte large now. So if you imagine, we're talking about one person's phone, but at scale, there are clients of ours that have 10,000 phones they have to be assessing a year. And to have a terabyte per phone is too large, and it's over retaining data that could be relevant in another matter. They're over preserving. And so it really is helping us like cut costs, cut, the risk of that over retention by providing that to the corporate as well. So it's kind of another win-win there where we're definitely helping the custodian with that. We're also protecting the corporation with it, or the end client.
If you're not getting everything, how do you know you're not missing something?
Oh, sure. So we hash and validate everything off the phone, not of what's collected, right? So the phone has a manifest of what exists, right? So if I'm looking for WhatsApp, I can tell if WhatsApp is or is not installed, right? So there's things like that where we'll report those things back. And then there's also like other, identifying information that will help. So like a good example would be, let's say I'm looking for texts for 3 years. If you collect the texts off that phone, ModeOne will report back the date of what was available on that phone for those texts. So if I'm looking for 3 years and ModeOne reports back that there was only 6 months of texts, then that's a good trigger for our clients to either follow up with the custodian, what are their data retention settings? Did they do any purging 6 months ago? Did they get a new phone? Right. So there's stuff like that give us the ability to, inquire more from the user to make sure that we're not missing anything, that there's not another phone that exists somewhere that we need to be capturing, stuff like that. So again, just giving our users and our clients the ability to be prepared and ask those questions proactively versus, for anyone listening that's ever gotten it, a depot where a client admits they had a third phone or something like that. Now they're in a scramble. That's what we're trying to avoid there.
Yeah. With remote collection, is there any greater danger of the custodian deleting or purging information in advance of the collection?
I wouldn't say there's a greater risk for it, right? We have a couple safeguards to make sure that people aren't purging mid-collection. That doesn't mean that they're prohibited from deleting mid-collection, but we would know if that was happening, right? So there's always going to be that risk with nefarious actors that are, having malicious intent with their data. We've built in as many safeguards as we can against that. The fact that it's international or not, I don't think there's an increased risk to that. I think the only thing that we see if there's international collections is the app usage is different, right? So obviously text messaging, WhatsApp's huge in the US, but Line in Japan, Hike, Viber, Kik, things like that have just like these regional hotspots. And so that's where we're seeing the differentiators.
I know that earlier this year you launched this participant filtering, is that what you were kind of just describing? In order to be, in other words, that you can take a specific text conversation between two people without having to take somebody's entire collection of texts or everything like that. Is that
exactly?
How does that work?
And
Yeah.
so it's kind of opened the door on. When we started, we were so heavy in e-discovery and litigation and legal hold. As soon as we started announcing participant filtering, that opened the door for a lot of our corporate clients that are doing any sort of like internal investigation or HR issues or things like that, because the CEO has too much private data on their phone for it all to be collected, right? And so the fact that we can target the text from the day is opened up a whole new kind of market for us. It's pretty cool.
Do customers of ModeOne or does ModeOne offer any advantage in terms of collecting different types of data on mobile devices or different data from different types of messaging formats or anything else like that?
Yep. So where we differentiate ourselves, we focus on as many third-party messaging apps as we can, and then OS specific applications. Some of the data types that are on the phone that are kind of outside of those two would be like your O365 email, your Gmail, your Slack, your Teams. We'd be the first ones to tell you you can go to the source. We can go to, through your O365 admin to pull that stuff better. So we're not supporting those types of collections off the phone, but, third-party chat apps, OS specific apps, browsing history, location information, stuff like that. But it's kind of one of the challenges that we have in front of us is there's nothing stopping you from creating your own chat app, right? It could be Signal 2 or whatever you guys want to call it, right? But so we always have to be kind of staying up to date with the hot apps, what it's got high usage, stuff like that. But that's where we're differentiating and where we're focusing on the phone. We're not grabbing everything from the phone. We're not grabbing Teams, Slack, email, stuff like that.
You're listening to an interview with Matt Rasmussen, the founder and CEO of ModeOne, a company that enables the same-day collection of data from smartphones without the need for physical collection of the devices or on-site forensics personnel. We'll get back to that conversation in a moment, but first, please take this opportunity to learn about the sponsors who so generously support LawNext. Paradigm is revolutionizing the legal industry by offering a comprehensive suite of innovative technology solutions, combining the power of top-tier legal practice management platforms, including Practice Panther, Meriscase, Lollylaw, and Bill for Time. Paradigm provides a complete suite of tools designed to meet the unique needs of law firms of all sizes and specialties. With native online payments and intuitive interfaces, Paradigm makes it easy to streamline your workflow and focus on what matters most, serving your clients. Discover more at joinparadigm.com. Welcome back to LawNext. By the way, let me mention that we are very appreciative of the sponsors who support this podcast. If you'd like to be one of them, you can reach out to us. For a full media kit about opportunities not just on this podcast, but on LawSite's blog and our various other properties, email Ben Ambrogi. That's Ben at lawnextmedia.com. As a product, ModeOne is unique in its ability to remotely collect data from smartphones for e-discovery, legal holds, investigations, and other purposes, and to do so in a targeted way, collecting only the data that's needed for the case. But is it right for every case? Is it right for every type of user? As we continue with our conversation with CEO Matt Rasmussen, I ask him about that. Let's get back to it. Given the sort of your ability to be specific, to operate remotely, are there the types of cases that you're, or e-discovery matters that you're maybe not right for?
Um, for sure. We talk about this pretty often on our sales calls, actually, is there's for any product that is collecting a whole image of a phone or exploiting the phone to grab specific material, there is absolutely a use case for that, right? If it's a criminal matter, if there was like an intellectual property leak and we want to find out where this data could have been exfiltrated, I would be the first one to tell you, let's grab everything. We need to look at where this stuff was, where it was going. But outside of that, it really is kind of a 90% use case where ModeOne is the appropriate tool. And I'm only speaking about that. I mean, obviously, I'm the business owner, so I've got a little
Yeah.
personal investment there. But speaking from the buyer's perspective, right, when I was doing this at the firm, um, ask anybody, how many times did you have to collect a phone and you needed the sub encrypted layers and you needed to get in their password bank? The answer is almost always zero, right? Because it is, I need the messaging. I need to know where he was. Did he search for that thing in Safari? That is really what we're targeting. That's really what's necessary. And so that's kind of where we're focusing. And I like I said, I think it is the 90% use case of where we're just looking for messaging between 10 parties, and that's what the collection is.
Yeah. What about either, I guess, what's your target market in terms of size of case, size of law firm that might be using it? Who are your customers?
So that's kind of I hate to say this, but it's anybody that has a phone
That's
that
okay.
has to grab data off of it.
Yeah.
Honestly, like, there's we helped somebody out 2 weeks ago because it was a law firm and they found out in a depot that a client had an iPhone, but they also had an Android that wasn't disclosed. And then that guy lives in Rhode Island, and there was a scramble to find a forensics vendor to grab his Android. We needed to produce it that night. Right. So like there's use cases for that. There could be a plaintiff's firm. It could be a large like AmLaw 25 defense firm. They run into those kind of situations, right? There's huge scale mergers and acquisitions, right? Like texts of investors need to be reviewed to make sure that they're not manipulating stock price and negotiating off channel and things like that. There's also, we've got clients who have called us where they use a messaging archiver that scrapes their SMS traffic from their corporately owned devices. That system went down. And they had a 45-day gap where that system was down. And they are a financial services client. And they have FINRA compliance regulations that their communication records need to be stored for 7+ years, right? So we helped them patch 318 phones in 2.5 weeks, right, to make sure that they were compliant with those regulations. And so it's kind of interesting and it's great for us. But there are so many different applications. We've built the system to be so flexible. It's not just built to be an e-discovery thing. It really is, do you have a phone? Do you need to get some targeted data off of it? And whatever, curveball or variable differences there are, we built it to be able to accommodate that.
Yeah. Do you integrate with any of the review platforms?
We do. So we have the only application that can push smart message data straight into a RHEL 1 or RHEL server environment. So we have an application that's built for that. That's awesome. We have some integrations into Xtero and Reveal's legal hold tools, which is huge for our clients because they can put Bob's email in OneDrive on hold, but his smartphone is a little bit of a harder asset to lock down. So we're building in several integrations for that. And we have a few others that are kind of, behind the curtain right now. We'll probably be able to talk about more of those, at Legal Week this year.
All right. What about it? Do you go to Relativity Fest? Will you be there?
I will be yep. So Ryan Fry and
Yeah.
I will be at Fest this year. So I think we're doing that. We have a couple of small conferences throughout the rest of the year. And then the University of Florida and Legal Week early next year is where we really start the conference circuit again.
Yeah. Good. I'll see you at Relativity Fest. So, and I
Yeah.
know that you also recently announced your expansion to the UK. Uh, what does that mean?
So for lots of our clients, specifically with international kind of presence, when we're collecting data in the EU or South America or Canada, things like that, there are corporate rules. Sometimes there are federal rules or country rules of that data needing to reside within the country's borders. And so we just analyzed, from our clients where we had the biggest presence, the EU and UK were the largest ones. So we chose that as target number one. But what that means now is before we'd have to get custodian consent. Hey, Bob, I'm collecting your text, and that text digitally is going to come back to the United States. What we've done now is our users can use a separate environment in the UK or wherever we choose to spin it up. And that data will collect from, again, anywhere else in the world and route that data back to a cloud data storage center, depending on what region they chose. So that way we can keep UK data in the UK, and it helps us with GDPR things and stuff like that. So
So
expanding into
you're
Europe
compliant and
more.
your
So
clients are compliant.
correct.
Yeah. So what's ahead for ModeOne? What are we going to see coming down the pike over the next year, 2 years, 2 years or so into it? What happens over the next couple of years?
Yeah. So, I mean, we always have the thing that's in the rear view all the time is just emerging applications that is changing all the time. That's one of the things we're always staying consistent and on top of to make sure that we're being able to support those for our clients. So that's a big focus. But we've also got things where we're building it so that our clients can have a totally enclosed ModeOne environment within their firewall, right? And so your data or the corporate data is no longer leaving the corporation's custody and control. They can operate it all within the confines of the business. So that's huge. More integrations and feature sets, integrations into other e-discovery tools, additional analysis tools and reporting. And then for our clients, the big thing that we're focusing on is large scale acquisitions. Like I said earlier, we've got clients. I used to think that like 100 phones per client would be this huge, awesome thing, but we've got clients who are 10,000, 50,000, 100,000 units a year that they need to be touching. And so building a cloud framework that can scale to that need, that's a huge focus for us.
Yeah. Are you the only ones doing what you're doing? I mean, being able to collect the data in this sort of targeted way via the cloud off of smart devices?
We are. Yeah. So that kind of comes down to a few things. One of the larger things is because ModeOne isn't exploiting or hacking the phones, both Android and Apple have allowed ModeOne into their developer programs where we get more keys to the kingdom and we can talk to the phone in a more intelligent way to grab this stuff off. People can still get across the finish line, right? They can still go find that one text, but they still have to collect the whole phone. They still have to go gain access to that phone. So yeah, it really does. I mean, it sounds very self-serving, but we are the only system that is able to do this, specifically targeting the data off the phone, not having to collect everything and then parse through that.
Does that mean that you're also better prepared for updates to operating systems or other kinds of updates to the mobile
Oh,
devices?
that's a great question because we actually have that coming up. So iOS 18 is scheduled here in September. So that's something we kind of advertise a lot. We're also the only system that has what we call 0-day support. So everyone else that is interacting with these phones, as soon as a new OS comes out, there's a scramble to make sure that their software works, that it's reading the new updates. They're kind of doing some reverse engineering and stuff like that, right? So we literally had a custodian. They were using kind of an incumbent software. The custodian did an OS update overnight and they could no longer use the incumbent software and we had to jump in and help them, right? And that's because we get access to these OSs like months ahead of time. Like I've had iOS 18 since May. I think we're on 18.1 or 18.2 now. And so we're able to like in not even just in real time, we're able to prepare for these major releases because we get such early access there.
And 18 is also changing the ability of I'm not going to say this correctly, but the ability of the iOS messaging app to communicate with the Android messaging app, or it's going to use the
Oh yeah, yeah,
Android
yeah, yeah,
messaging
yeah.
format or something like that, right? Or
So that's going to be something that's super interesting, and we're definitely keeping all our eyes on that. So an iPhone has two types of texting, right? There's green bubble SMS, and there's blue bubble iMessage. And that blue bubble is encrypted. It's sent over your data. It's not sent over the cell carrier. And Android has a similar product called RCS, Rich Communication Service. And they're going to make those cross platform now, which means that there are systems out there that have historically been archiving SMS traffic. I mean, now that encrypted messaging is going to be down to the text message level, now that SMS scraping is kind of, I mean, it's not going to go away, but it's going to be severely deprecated because everything's going to be encrypted, everything over data, right? And so it's going to be a very interesting kind of turn of events here with those changes for sure.
Does that mean our bubbles will all be the same color?
No, I don't know how they're going to do that. The other cool thing that we've been playing around with iOS 18 is actually with your Notes app, which sounds crazy, but you with iOS 18 you now can have the ability to record a phone call. It will
Oh,
disclose that to the user. So if Bob, you and I run a call and I press record, it would tell you, "Hey, this is being recorded." But it will transcribe the entire phone call to your notes,
wow.
right? And so it's just, there's so many different features. They're bringing AI into this. There's a whole upgrade with Siri. So it's just, it's crazy, the changes that are coming out.
A lot of fun and new
Mhm.
opportunities for you in ModeOne.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. I have a lot of people listen to this podcast who are themselves founders of startups in the legal tech world. And so I am curious, again, given that you came from a background where you weren't an entrepreneur per se, what have you learned about that side of the business? What have you learned about being a CEO and starting a business?
Well, I think I have a little bit of a cheat. My family is kind of a historical entrepreneurial family, so I think I some of the mindset stuff I had, I just kind of grew up with. So
Oh,
I
good.
kind of had a little bit of a leg up there, but it still has been just so many lessons to be learned and things like that. I think one I've already mentioned, right? You can't do everything yourself. Like if I wanted to think that ModeOne was all my effort and all my results of my input, that would be, a huge mischaracterization, right? So understanding what you do know, what you're strong at, understanding where you're weaker at, what you may not have skills for, and finding the right partners to come together. That was huge for me. I think that's really helped me move a lot faster through all this. It's way harder than you think it's going to be, right? Because I used to think, okay, I'm just going to do phones and I'm going to have somebody that does my development and someone who does my sales. But man, there's payroll and there's marketing and there's LinkedIn posts and there's all the things that come into play there. My friend Joy Morale told me that, you know, starting your own company, you still have to work 12 hours. You just get to choose which 12 hours. And so that's really what I'm doing is finding things between baseball practice and, dinner with
Right.
the family and stuff like that. But it's been kind of learning on the fly and making sure that I'm in very close sync with my leadership to make sure that we're all, in the same strategy, all heading the same direction. We're all, going towards a common goal. I think doing those things at a very high frequency has really kind of paid off for us.
All right. Well, I always like to ask at the end whether there was anything that you really wanted to say that I haven't asked you about. Anything else about ModeOne that we haven't talked about that you think is important we ought to cover?
It's funny because the two things I wanted to talk about, I didn't even know you were going to ask. Like the 0 day support is a huge one, and then the RCS thing is a big one. Nothing that I don't think we haven't talked about. I think the other thing I guess would be the fact that we started this as a e-discovery specific tool, but this has just blossomed into a kind of ubiquitous, flexible technology that works with anywhere that somebody has a phone and needs that data has been great. So, really trying to kind of change the perception that it's a litigation tool or legal preservation only, while it does very well in those applications, right? Corporate compliance, FINRA and SEC
Hmm.
regulations, HR and investigative needs, and on and on and on.
Yeah.
Those have been great for us to kind of grow into there.
Yeah. Great. Well, Matt, thanks so much for joining me today and telling us all about ModeOne. Pleasure to talk to you.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Bob, and I'll see you in Chicago, man.
Yeah. I'll see you in Chicago at Relativity Fest, not too far down the road. Big thanks to Matt Rasmussen of ModeOne for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. If you'd like to share your own thoughts or comments on today's show, please do so by messaging us on LinkedIn or X, or by emailing me directly, ambrogi@gmail.com. And if you're a fan of the show, please leave us a review wherever you get your podcasts. LawNext is a production of LawNext Media. I'm your host, Bob Ambrogi. I hope you'll join us again next time for another episode of LawNext.